Amen. All right, gentlemen, we're in James chapter 5. James 5. You know how we were just saying the Bible is not silent on alcohol? Over probably close to 100 references. The Bible is not silent on rich men being rich. In James chapter 5, he's already sent a warning shot out about wealth, being rich. Now, let me just say before we go any further, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. Nothing wrong with that. It's what you do with it. It's how you prioritize your life around it. It's what you do to get it. It's what you don't do to get it. I know a lot of Christians that are quite guilty of many sins of omission because they're trying to accumulate wealth. It's one of those things where you come to a place where you say, okay, I need to be able to pay my bills. And I think about how foolish people are when we live in the age of technology, and we live in very heavily populated areas of the country, and we've become so trained in going to the store and buying everything we need, thinking that somehow, some way, all of our needs are going to be met by ShopRite and Walmart or Acme. Technology has helped us gain a little, but I really believe it's caused us to lose a lot. And so James here says, "Go to now, ye rich men." He revisits this. And he says, "Weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you." You know what this is? This is understanding that everything has consequences to it. Everything. You need to keep in mind that you and I are temporal spatial. We can only occupy one place at one time. And that's why when a Christian man, Christian woman, Christian young man, Christian young woman realizes that there are unalterable divine appointments in life. I told you, for years, 8 years, I worked at Boeing and made a pretty good hourly wage, very good hourly wage. And I can't tell you how many times I turned down overtime. And it's not because I couldn't use the money. It's because I had a divine appointment somewhere else that had to do with ministry and serving God, and just said, you know what, Lord, you know my needs. Listen, Boeing helicopters, the Boeing company, is not my security. The Lord Jesus Christ is my security. I can get a lot further with the Lord than I can ever with a Boeing company. And so we have to be careful where we put our trust. And James says, "Go to now, ye rich men." This is a warning about those that, and if you keep your hand there and you go back to 1 Timothy chapter 6, 1 Timothy 6, this is a verse that we spoke about not too long ago, where it says in 1 Timothy 6, looking in verse 5, this is talking about how we as Christians need to understand biblical contentment. "Perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, supposing. They make a very, very poor assumption. They're supposing that gain is godliness. From such withdraw thyself. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. You've heard that cute little cliche. You know how much the billionaire left when he died? All of it. You can't take a penny with you. You're not taking any. You're not crossing anything over. Now, the Egyptians didn't believe that. They believed that, when you die, you got to cross the river Styx, and so they would close your eyes and put coins on your eyes so you could pay the fare to, the occult, they think, let's put everything in the casket with them. They're going to need it. Nope, you could just, pajamas on me, I can care less. It's just going to wither up and, doesn't matter. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and in the many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. Which drown men in destruction and perdition. Every time somebody says, I'm going to get rich no matter what, when you consider what goes on, and I mean this sincerely, we all know, I say we all, most of us in the room know, who's involved in organized crime in the city. We all know somebody who knows somebody, right? Whether you call it the mafia or syndicate, whatever, there's some very serious and bad people. People that deal in drugs are some serious and bad people. They're not to be trusted. They have their own set of ethics, but at the end of the day, they're killers. Whether they kill you with a gun, a knife, or a needle in your arm, it doesn't matter. They're killers. They just don't care. They don't value life. But we now live in a time where the only group of people worse than them are politicians. Now, sincerely, I understand why we smirk. But that breaks my heart. Not for me, I'm going to be 60. It breaks my heart for my kids and my grandkids. That's what really kills me. I want them to have hope. The Bible talks about these foolish and hurtful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. That word perdition is not thrown around often in the Bible. And there's only two people to whom it applies directly to as a predicate nominative. And it's the Antichrist and Judas Iscariot. The Antichrist is, the Antichrist, devil incarnate. And of Judas, Jesus said, have I not chosen 12, and one of you is a devil? So when men seek after and chase after riches, and women, by the way, using it generically, it's quite destructive. And we understand why, because if you look at verse 10 in context, it really has a much greater impact, in my opinion. For the love of money is the root of all evil. All evil. That means there's always somebody trying to make a profit off of somebody else. Now, to be clear, let me just say this, and I mean this sincerely. I am in no way a Marxist, fascist, socialist. I don't believe profit is a dirty word. I don't believe that. The Bible talks about work. The Bible talks about servitude. Somebody says, the Bible condones slavery. No, it doesn't. It condones servitude. There's a difference. And we're all serving someone, and we're all serving something. You have to be careful who and what it is that you serve. The person on the street right now who's an alcoholic, what are they chasing? Their next drink. Person who's on the street who's an addict, what are they chasing? Their next bag. The person who's a corporate executive, they're chasing their next million. How do you differentiate? Because the person who's the executive, they might have less morals and ethics than the person who's on the street chasing a bag. Now, visually we look at them, we say, oh, clearly that person, they're a millionaire. They might be able to help me. And that, you get that? And that's why James, earlier in the epistle, warns about how we have respect for the rich and we don't have as much respect for those that don't appear to be well off and wealthy. He says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. How many of us, you don't have to raise your hand, have seen, witnessed with our own experiences how money has destroyed family relationships? I have. I've seen it. Not with me and my siblings, but I've seen how money has really affected families. What is the problem? Well, that's not money. Money's not the problem. Because when James wrote this epistle, I don't know, what was the form of currency then? I don't know. The point is, it was some kind of coinage. It could have been salt. It could have been, mint. It was whatever was tradable at that point. We're very, very foolish to how currency works. Because we're just been so trained that dollar, 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 dollar. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith. He's talking about Christians. When Christ was, what's the first temptation Christ faces? It's on the mountain. Remember where he comes out of the wilderness? And where does the devil attack him? His appetite, right? First is food. Act independently of God. Right? Act independently of your Father. Take what's yours. Take it. It's yours for the taking. You're hungry? Go grab food. Then he says, jump from the pinnacle of the temple and the angels will catch you. He says, boy, that'll be fame. You know how famous you'll be? When all of the leaders of Israel, the Sanhedrin, see with their own eyes how those angels catch you. They'll worship you. And then, of course, with fame comes fortune. He shows them all the kingdoms of the earth. So I'll make you very, very rich. You got to realize something. That Satan has the ability to make people very, very wealthy. That's why, well, when we mention certain things like the Cabal and the Illuminati, and you understand that there is a place called the Bohemian Grove where very wealthy people go to, and they plot and plan. There is such a thing as the Good Boy Club or Good Boys or something like that, where billionaires come together and they decide how things are going to go in society. When Back in the 30s and 40s, they plotted, how can we absolutely control men like sheep? And they said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll get their kids public school system. We'll control them through their kids. We'll control them through entertainment, television, Hollywood. It's all about control. When you control people, guess what you also control? Their money. You control you control it all. What do you think Roosevelt was thinking when he said, what's his most famous line? I'll put a chicken in every pot. That was the idea that, hey, we can depend on government to feed us. And now, all these years later, guess what? Guess who the most popular people in any society are? The postman. Because they drop off the checks, man. Listen, you can if you're if you're a mail carrier, you're the most protected person in any neighborhood because you're bringing checks. I know now they do direct deposit and all that, but you get the point. Yes, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some, not all, but some coveted after, they have erred. Now when you understand what the Bible teaches and you look at all these men and women on television that are multi-millionaires. I'm not going to name their names, but pretty much just go on any television and look up. They're all multi-millionaires. Say, Pastor, there's nothing wrong with money. I agree. But they sell themselves out doctrinally so that they can make more money and more money and more money. And that's why he says in verse 11 of 1 Timothy 6, but thou, O man of God, flee these things. What things? He says in verse 10, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Do you know who the most miserable people in all the world are? Wealthy, rich people, rich liberals. They're miserable. They're miserable. I've not yet met a real legitimate wealthy person who actually has joy and contentment and peace in their lives. It's a horrific thing. And I've met a lot of them. They're consumed. They're consumed with making more money, keeping what they got, and controlling everybody they think they're better than. And it consumes them. Back in James chapter 5, Paul says that they suppose. The supposing is on the idea of an unsubstantiated assumption. And he says, referencing back to 1 Timothy 6, that the problem is with seeking riches as a priority. It'll cause you to fall into temptation unnecessarily. It'll bring unnecessary snares or nets, and it'll cause you and I to fall into many foolish and hurtful lusts. Because once you get money, guess what you want to do? You want to buy what everybody else doesn't have. I've heard so many wealthy, powerful people testify. Now, I'm not telling you they all got saved. But when a wealthy person comes to their senses, you know what they'll say? I was miserable. I had everything. I remember hearing somebody testifying one time, a Christian apologist, was saying that, and I even said this, that, you know, when you come out of a major victory in life, like, say, athletes. Somebody, whether it's boxing. You know the name Mike Tyson? Did you ever follow the life of Mike Tyson? It's a train wreck. Absolute train wreck. You know why? Because he was, in my opinion, the toughest guy on the planet in the ring, in the squared circle. That was one tough guy. But at the height of his career, he was completely out of control. Because that fame, that fortune, that clout, that power, it gets to your head. It'll mess you up big time. When athletes retire, to a man, to a person, you know what they tell you? Nothing can ever replace the roar of the crowd and the moment, that moment when they're on top of the world, when they're the person, when they're the whatever, right? And so this kind of behavior, and what it does is when it happens, and it does happen, that they'll try the rest of their life trying to find that fulfillment when it's not possible to be had. And that's, by the way, what happens when people start to get into substance use. You'll try and chase that same high. Can you ever get it? Never get it, right? Never. It's impossible. You're chasing a shadow, Pinocchio. Not Pinocchio, excuse me, Peter Pan. You're chasing a shadow. You'll never catch it. It can't be gotten. It's impossible. But you'll spend all of your life and all of your time and all of your energy trying to get what you can't. And that's riches, by the way. Ask them to be quiet. So, in James chapter 5, we see, he says, your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Now, this doesn't sound like the apparel of a rich person or rich people. Why would James write that? Your riches are corrupted. Is the gold no longer valuable? Is the silver No, it's not that the silver or gold has lost its value. It's corrupted you. You're not the same person anymore. I don't mean you in this room. I'm talking about those that are deceived by this, that chase it. And your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered. It's become a cancer in your life. That's why it's not often, but you might hear such and such actor or actress completely leaves Hollywood because of it, being a cesspool. Like something happens in their life and they're like, wow, I was in the matrix for so long, I just got to get out of it. I need to find reality again. It's not often, but it does happen now and then. He says, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. Shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for the last days. When we were discussing, church business, Brother Josh puts it pretty succinctly. We need to remind ourselves the church is not a bank. Some people view the church as an ATM, right? But the church is not a bank. And what I mean is, like when I was in Ohio, those people, they're all pretty wealthy. And, they had at least probably anywhere between $300,000-$400,000 in the bank. All of their bills were paid and some. And I can tell you, they didn't even tithe the way they should have been tithing. Because one morning, one service, I asked everybody anonymously. Here, listen. Everybody, not everybody, people think I get concerned about finances. I don't get concerned about finances. Finances don't move me. They don't. Regardless of what anybody says. Never have, never will. But when people are desperate to try and find something, right, they get desperate. And anyway, I asked everybody in that congregation that day to anonymously write down what their tithe should be. So you make $1,000 a week, gross, 10% is $100. $100. Say, I don't want to give that to the church. That's fine. But God says it's mine. So you either give it with a joyful heart or God's going to take it. Choice is yours. You do whatever you want. I don't care. I really don't. But the point is, here's what I found out. That our offerings were, I don't know, $3,500, $4,000, $4,500 a week on average in that church. Guess what they should have been? $8,500 a week. You know what Malachi says? Can a man rob God? And I said, you people make me sick. You're so consumed with finances, you got $400,000 in a bank, and you're not tithing. And then you say, well, you don't value finance. I value finances fine. I have not, by God's grace, since I got right with God, since I started attending church, there's not been 1 year I haven't double tithed. Did you hear that? There hasn't been 1 year I haven't double tithed. And then people say, it just doesn't add up, Pastor. I see what you make. How do you... You can't do the math. It doesn't work with math. God blesses me in ways that are just miraculously astounding. You look at what I make in a year, you say, I don't know how you do it. And you know what? I don't either. But I don't spend near as much time being concerned about as other people are. I'm thankful for a cup of coffee today. You say, no, I'm serious. Every Sunday, driving the church, by God's grace, when we hit around exit, 13, Krista puts a mobile order in, and she says, you fly, I buy. So when we get here, I go and I get, and you know what? I love my coffee. Thank you, my dear daughter. It's not hard. But people that keep bringing up finances, that's their sin. You get it? That's their problem. That's their weak spot. And you know what people have a tendency to do? Project. They project their issues onto you or somebody else. Behold. Now he says in verse 3, you have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud. You know what happens when you don't tithe? You're treating God fraudulently. Say, well, I'm not wealthy. I can't afford it. Nobody can afford it. But God says, you give me what I require. You give me what belongs to me. And I'll take good care of you. And that's how God works. He says, you kept it back by fraud. Now you're crying. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. He says, not only are you rich, but you're not treating people well that are in your employment. You say God doesn't care about that. Oh, really? This isn't some Old Testament passage. This is a New Testament passage. You have lived in pleasure on the earth and have been wanton. You see, the guy that has the big house on the beach and the boat and the brand new Escalade and the brand new Jaguar, and his kids go to Ivy League schools, that guy is missing a real big part of what life is. And he's never filled the void in his heart. Say, are you saying that he's ungodly just because he's wealthy? I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there's a reason why Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into heaven. They're not my words, they're his. He says you have lived in pleasure on the earth. He's talking the first generation Jews. Now, you don't need me to give you a lesson on the association with Jewish people and money, do you? Seriously. You understand that God blesses them. Wherever they go, they're blessed financially. And I know that they own a lot of stuff. And I know that Satan uses them too. And sometimes I can't not that it's my business, but I can't differentiate between what God blesses them and how Satan blesses them. But what I can tell you is that all the big corporations in the world are run by Jews. And I'm not anti-Israel and anti-Jew. God forbid. But he's talking the New Testament Jews. He says, you have lived in pleasure on the earth and have been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. I'll finish with this. There are three kinds of rich men. Number one, there are those that cry on the earth. You know why they cry on the earth? Because eventually they all have a moment or a time in their life when they realize, even though they have everything, they really have nothing. You know how humbling that is? Why do you think they try and buy health? Why do you think they want to live forever? The second kind of rich man is the one that cries in hell. You remember that story Jesus told in Luke 16 about Lazarus and the rich man? Where did that guy end up? In hell. Jesus said, you fared sumptuously. You had a good life, man. You lived in a nice, beautiful home. Warm in the winter, cool in the summer. You had a nice backyard. You had the pool. You had this, you had that. You had it all. Except you didn't have me. And if you don't have Christ in your life, Christ in your heart, you have nothing. And now that guy's in hell. I don't say that. I mean, like now, right now. That man is in hell right now, still crying out. And the third kind of rich man is those that cry at the Bema judgment. That's a born-again believer. Somebody who's truly born again, who knows Christ. But they try and use their wealth to buy God's mercy, patience, long-suffering, blessing. You can't buy God's blessings, fellas. That's why wealthy men in a church, and I'm glad we're all broke. You know why I say that? Because when I was in Ohio, there were some wealthy people. And you know what wealthy people assume? They assume that you're going to hold them in a whole different respect than you will everybody else. Not me. Nope. Don't do it that way. You know why? Because now, if I do that, now you own me. I'm not going to let you own me. Nobody owns me. My wife doesn't own me. If I'm not going to let my wife, what'd you say? You don't know about that? I'm rented, not owned. But the point is that I'm not going to let wealth. And they try. They just assume, well, hey, I get it. I get it. I'm not going to treat you any differently than I do anybody else. You know why? It would be improper. It would not be right. And so we need to be careful with wealth and riches. You can come in. I'm done. And hopefully that helps. That you keep your priorities right. Keep your priorities. There's nothing wrong with money. Nothing wrong with it. If you tithe and you do right by God and God has your heart, when God has your heart, He has your wallet too. Right? When people don't give God their heart and they think that the only relationship they have with God is through their wallet, then they're very foolish.